One of the jobs that I had for a few years was a national sales manager for an audiometric testing company. Audiometric testing is nothing more than if companies have decibel factors in their plants where the noise level goes over 85 decibels, then there's a good chance that their employees could get hearing problems. If their employees get hearing problems, then of course those employees are probably going to want to seek compensation from the companies. So to prevent that, our company, which was a division of Merck, was the grandson of the founder of Merck, started a company. And what he did was they did testing. And they had one guy in New York who was the international sales manager, Terry, and I was the outside guy. And I would go around. I would fly to 36, 40 states within a year period. I traveled probably by car, 25, 30,000 miles rental cars. So I've kind of like been all over. But this particular one, I think you might get a kick out of because it was very, very interesting to me. It had to be back in the 70s, early 80s. Dubuque Packing, Dubuque, Iowa. Meat packing processing plant where they slaughter cows, pigs. That's it. I didn't know. I figured it was a plant, maybe 100, 200 people. Before I knew it, I got in there. It was 6,000 people at that time. The problem was that the saws, little bitty hand saws they used to cut the hide, they literally cut the hide off the cow and then pull back and cut again and pull back and tear the skin, the hide off the cow, ran at about 90, 95 decibels. So I was the guy that had to come in there, sell them on the idea that they should get tested. And then we'd bring in our trucks. We had about 10 tractor trailers throughout the country. And on there were all different types of testing equipment. And every year the guys would be tested. If they were tested, their ears were good, and they were tested, then if something happened, well, naturally, they could not sue the company. Went to this company, as I said, Dubuque Packing. They were slaughtering cows and pigs. Think of the time, I said, late 70s, early 80s. I'm sure the mechanization has changed quite a bit. But this is what it was. Put me in a yellow cap or helmet that you'd wear like on a construction site. I wore a white jacket that you'd wear like for going into a lab. And I had yellow boots on, rubber boots to my knees. And that's because that's where all the bowels of various animals and blood, and there were guys washing the blood into drains and all. I know it sounds very gory, but you got to imagine me as a fairly young guy, and I'm looking at this, and you see these cows coming across. On the ceiling, they had like a belt with chains on it, and it would slowly creep, and on each leg of the cow, could be the right or left, whatever, but usually I guess it was the left foreleg. The cow would be locked in, head down, and they'd be mowing and they'd be coming across the conveyor belt, I don't know, 100, 200 at a time. On the other side of the plant, there were pigs being slaughtered. Yeah, you're probably saying, what the hell? Well, again, I had to sell them on testing. Many thousands, it was a good account. So I'm watching these cows come through and moo, 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 and before you know it, somebody on the line would poke it and they were upside down because you can't leave the blood in the meat. It's just like if you shot a deer, you'd hang it outside and let the blood drain out, because if not, the blood would all go into the meat. So after that, there would be guys along the line that would saw the hides off, and then there were individuals cutting various parts of the cow. When it came to the kosher kill was very unique. It was done by a rabbi butcher. Not many parts, various bowels and things like that were not kept. The cow had to be no problem with the cow, no disease, no anything. It had to be perfectly kept cow. It had to be perfectly kosher, or else it was not deemed kosher for the Jewish population, the Orthodox Jews or whatever. They had a butcher who was a rabbi with a big yellow leather apron on, and he had this knife that had to be big enough, probably 1.5 feet long, very sharp. And you couldn't go back and forth. That was another thing. These are all things, if you look it up, you'll find out about the kosher kill. And he would just take it by a horn and just with the knife go underneath and slit the throat. Blood out. I don't have to tell you the rest. I mean, you can kind of figure it yourself. The other side, there were little pigs squealing, you know. And there was a guy or two or three or four or five, I don't know, poking it in the heart where it bled out. And the same thing. Guys would cut the hide and they would keep everything on the pig. They would keep the tail for bristles that were sold to China, for brushes. They would sell the feet for various types of mixtures for paint and stuff like that. It was quite an interesting thing. I got quite an ordeal. I was brought around by the plant manager and a couple of other people and telling me about the whole process. Then we're near where the franks are made, and the franks go into like sleeves, which you see, you get in a store, packaged. But to put them in, they're put into large vats. They're all turned and with these massive rotating blades inside, probably 500-pound vats. And they would turn it until it was ground up well, and then if it wasn't consistent enough, they literally, again, the time period, they would put sawdust in there so that it made a certain consistency, and then it would go into the sleeve easier, and then it go a certain length for a hot dog, and they'd cut it, and then a little bit further down, X amount were put into a package and then into a box and so on. Quite an experience. Keep in mind, I went there, got all done after about 2 hours of this, inside the plant watching and getting an education and so on. I was told to leave my clothes, go into the office, and I spoke to the plant manager, gave him my spiel about what I felt had to be done and what would be done to the company if they didn't do it. And decibel levels were above. Well, we had tested and found out that the decibel levels on those little hand saws with little rotating blades that cut the hides were probably about 90, 95. Which means that if a person was there for years and years and years, they would probably start to go tone deaf. That would mean they'd have a suit against the company. My job was to make sure that didn't happen. My job was to sell them on the idea of being tested every year. Thousands of them. And I did. Sold the job. Trucks would come in, whatever they were set up. There were maybe a dozen trucks throughout the United States. They were set up. And they would come in on whatever basis was set up between our company and the company that I sold to. Interesting. Traveled a lot. 1 week I traveled by car 1,700 miles from Mercantine, Iowa, all the way down into Missouri. I flew that up and down. That means took off and landed that week about 5-6 times. I accumulated, as I said earlier in my videos, over 1.5 million miles It went from various airlines, Texas Air to Continental. Got to know the president. I flew so much Gordon Bethune, then they sold it to United, which I have now. And I accumulated probably 1 million, 2 million miles, air miles. Always flew first class. Upgraded me. I didn't know what it was to fly. Sad. I didn't pay for it. They just upgraded me because of my mileage. And that was it. But I got tired of it after a year or two. This was more for a young guy. Literally, I was out for a week, back for a weekend, back out for 4 or 5 days, back for a weekend. And this went on for a couple of years. I was married, and I just reached a point where I said, either I got to leave or, they wanted to make me international sales manager. What good was it? Still a lot of traveling. I would have been traveling to Europe, China, who knows. Good paying jobs. Every one I had, I either worked up to or paid me well. I was a closer. I didn't know what it was. They sent me out there to do it. I interviewed for that job, was in the New York Times. It must have been about 80 applicants before me. I came in and the guy said, "That's it, you're hired." But like I say, after a couple of years, I got tired. Saw a lot of states throughout the United States. The only ones I think in my life I haven't seen was Alaska by choice and Washington, maybe Oregon, and maybe Montana. I think I saw 46 states in my travels. You name it, I was there. You named the hotel, I was there. You named the motel, I was there. You named the car rental, I had budget car cards, Republic at that time, car cards. Just show them my cards and off I go. I did a lot. I found that to be an interesting story. I thought I'd like to share it with you. And along the way, you'll find that my life is filled with all true stories, from motivation on whatever. And I like to share them with you. If you enjoyed them, subscribe. If you got any complaints or you got any opinion, write in. I thank you for taking the time and listening.